Everybody in that studio knew the rule. It was printed on the back of every contestant badge, in small black letters, 11 words long, and it had been there for 27 years. Most people clipped the badge on and never turned it over. But on a Wednesday afternoon in March, a 33-year-old man from Reno, Nevada, said 17 words into a live microphone, and Ray Calloway, who had hosted the family face-off for 3 decades, through blizzards, through a broken foot, through the week his own mother was in the hospital, took off his microphone, set it on the podium, walked down the stairs at the edge of the stage, and sat down in an empty seat in the front row of the audience. He did not come back for 11 minutes. And when he did come back, it was only because that young man finally did the one thing Ray had asked him to do. If you believe there are some things you don't say about a person's dead, hit that like button right now and subscribe to this channel, because this is one of those stories that deserves to keep getting told. Now let me tell you about Delphine Marchetti. Everybody in the Briar Hill neighborhood of Youngstown, Ohio, called her Dell. She was 69 years old, 4'11" in shoes, and for 45 years she had run a shop called Marchetti Alterations out of a storefront the size of a bedroom, wedged between a check cashing place and a bakery that had changed hands 6 times. Her father brought the trade over from Abruzzo. He was a tailor for the mills, back when the mills were still there, and he taught Dell to sew when she was 7 years old by having her take the same seam out and put it back in until it was straight enough that he couldn't find where she'd started. She opened her own shop at 24. She was still in it at 69. Dell Marchetti hemmed prom dresses. She took in wedding gowns and let out wedding gowns, sometimes the same gown 20 years apart for a mother and then a daughter. She fixed zippers on winter coats in November and turned the cuffs on work pants and sewed name patches onto uniforms for the gas company and the hospital and the school district. And she did 3 things for free for 45 years. And never once put a sign in the window about it. The first was military dress uniforms. Any service member, any branch, coming home or shipping out or standing up in somebody's wedding, she pressed it, she fit it, she squared the shoulders, and she would not take $1. She'd been doing it since 1980. Her husband Sal had come home from Vietnam to a town that didn't say much to him about it. And Dell decided early that at the very least, a man should be able to stand in a doorway looking like somebody was proud of him. The second was prom. If a kid came in with a dress off a clearance rack and a mother who kept looking at the price list on the wall, Dell would measure that girl, tell her the alteration was included in the price of the dress, and hand it back on a hanger 3 days later with the seams French finished like it came from a bridal salon. 45 years of that. The girls never knew. The mothers always did. There is a woman in Youngstown named Tasha Gillum, who is a 41-year-old high school principal now, and she will tell you the story if you ask her. In 2001, she was 17, and her mother was working nights at a nursing home, and Tasha found a dress on a clearance rack for $19 that was 3 sizes too big in the bodice and too long by 6 inches. She brought it to Marchetti Alterations because somebody told her Dell was cheap. Dell measured her, wrote nothing down on a ticket, and said the alterations came with that particular rack. Tasha believed her. 3 days later, she picked up a dress that had been rebuilt from the ribs out, the bodice recut, the hem weighted so it would hang right, a hook and eye added at the shoulder so the strap wouldn't slide, and she wore it to prom and had her picture taken in it, and that picture is on her desk at the school to this day. She did not learn until she was 32, from an aunt, that no such rack had ever existed. The third one Dell didn't talk about at all. There were 2 funeral homes in that ward, Enrico's on Wilson and the Baptist one over on Jefferson. And for 45 years, when a family brought in a suit for a man who had gotten smaller in his last year, or a dress that no longer fit the woman it was meant for, one of those funeral directors would walk it 2 blocks down to Dell's shop and set it on her counter. And Dell would close the shop, and she would do the work that night, and she would send it back with no invoice. Not a discount. No invoice. She did that for more than 1,100 families. Nobody outside those 2 funeral homes had any idea. Dell and Sal had 1 son. Anthony Marchetti was a lineman for the power company and a volunteer with the Briar Hill Fire Company, which is what a lot of young men in that part of Ohio did, because the town could not afford a full-time department and somebody had to go. 10 years before that taping, on a February night, a 2-story house on Ohio Avenue went up with a family of 5 inside. Anthony went in twice. The second time was for a 9-year-old boy named Devin who had gone up to the attic to hide from the smoke, because that is what children do. Anthony got him out. He handed that child to a paramedic on the front lawn, and then he sat down on the curb. And he never got back up. He was 27 years old. Sal Marchetti died 2 years after his son. The doctors put a word on it, but Dell had her own word for it, and she only ever said it once to her sister at the kitchen table, and she never said it again. So at 69, Dell Marchetti opened her shop alone 6 days a week, and she wore 2 things every single day: her mother's brass thimble on a chain around her neck, and Anthony's watch on her right wrist. That watch did not run. The crystal was cracked straight across, and the hands had stopped at 4:12, which was the last time anybody had wound it, and Dell had never had it fixed. 3 different watchmakers had offered. She turned all 3 of them down. Here is why she was on television. 8 months before that taping, the block her shop sat on was bought by a development company out of Columbus. The new owners tripled the rent on every storefront. The bakery closed in 6 weeks. The check cashing place closed in 9. Dell held on longer than anybody because she had 2 employees, Rosa, who had been with her 19 years, and Kim, who had been with her 6. And she could not make herself say the words that would put 2 women out of work in a town that did not have another job for them. By February, she was 4 months behind. The company sent a letter giving her until the 1st of June. Her niece filled out the application to the family face-off. Dell found out about it when the show called. She flew to California with her brother Vince, her niece Gina, Gina's husband Paul, and Rosa, because Rosa had been there 19 years, and Dell said if she was going on television, the shop was going with her. Across the stage stood the Rask family, out of Reno, Nevada, Wes Rask, the father, his daughter Marissa, his nephew Ty, his brother Dale, and at the buzzer, in a black quarter zip with his own logo on the chest, 33-year-old Colton Rask. Colton Rask had been on 5 game shows. He had a podcast about it. He had a system. He studied survey data. He practiced buzzer timing with an app he built, and he had come out of Reno with $22,000 in winnings and every intention of leaving with more. He was not, when you talked to him backstage, a cruel person. He was something that in front of a camera can be worse. He was a man who had decided that everybody else was playing at something he was serious about. Ray Calloway came out to his music. He shook 11 hands. He got to Dell last, and he had to bend way down to do it, and he said something to her that didn't make it onto the broadcast. And she laughed and put her hand over her mouth. Then the game started, and for about 6 minutes it was an ordinary episode. The Rask family jumped out ahead. Colton was fast. That's not a knock on him. He was genuinely mechanically fast, and twice he beat Vince to the buzzer by less than 1/10 of a second, and both times he turned to his father with his fist closed and his eyes shut. The way an athlete does. The trouble started in the 3rd round, and like it always does, it started small. Dell's hands shook. They had for about 4 years. It didn't affect her sewing, which is one of those strange mercies nobody can explain, but it was very visible on a podium under television lights, and when she gripped the buzzer with both hands to steady it, Colton said, to nobody in particular, "This is going to be a long taping." Marissa Rask said Colton, just his name. He waved her off. 4th round, Dell buzzed in, and she took her time, because Dell Marchetti had never in her life said the first thing that came into her head. Colton drummed his fingers on the podium loud enough for the mic to pick it up, and Ray gave him a look over the top of his cards, the kind of look that says 1. 5th round, Dell got a face value answer, and the board came up empty. Strike, Colton exhaled through his teeth and said, "Okay, so we're just guessing now." Ray said, without turning around, "We're just playing, son. That's all anybody's doing." 6th round, Rosa answered, and she has an accent. She came up from Guatemala when she was 22, and Colton repeated her answer back with the vowels wrong. And his cousin Ty laughed and immediately looked like he wished he hadn't. Ray turned all the way around then. He said, "That's 2. He said it pleasantly. Everybody in the building understood exactly what it meant. They went to a break. Under the lights, while the makeup people worked and the audience got their instructions, Dell's niece Gina leaned over and asked her grandmother's question. Did she want to say something to that young man off camera just between them? And Dell said no. She said she had spent 45 years standing behind a counter, listening to people say things they didn't mean because they were scared about money, or scared about a wedding, or scared about a funeral, and that the trick was to let it go by and keep your needle moving. She said the boy was showing off, and showing off is a young man's way of being frightened. She was wrong about that, but only barely, and only for another 4 minutes. When they came back from break, Colton Rask was in a worse mood, not a better one, because during the break, his father had said something to him at the podium, and his father had been right, and that should have been the end of it. 9 times out of 10, that is the end of it. A host draws the line, the contestant gets embarrassed, the show moves on, and the whole thing gets cut in the edit, and nobody ever knows it happened. Then came the 7th round, and the question was a soft one, the kind Ray throws in to let a family breathe, and the answer Dell gave was a wristwatch. And Ray, being Ray, saw the one on her wrist and said, "That's a beautiful watch, Miss Dell. That got a story?" And Del Marchetti said, "It was my son's." She didn't say anything else. She didn't explain. She just put her left hand over it, the way you'd cover something to keep it warm, and she smiled at Ray and waited for the next question. And Colton Rask leaned into his microphone and said, "Man, every single one of these shows, there's always one. Somebody drags out a dead relative because they know the audience will just hand it to them. Ma'am, he's gone. Put the sad watch away and play the game." 17 words in, Wes Rask had already turned to look at his son. By word 20, Marisa had her hand over her face. The audience made it sound like a room losing its air. Ray Calloway did not say one word. He reached up, unclipped the microphone from his lapel, wound the cord around his hand twice, and set it down on the corner of Dell's podium. He took his cards and squared them and set those down too. Then he walked to the stairs at the edge of the stage, went down them, walked 4 rows into the audience, found an empty seat on the aisle, and sat down in it. The stage lights stayed up. The cameras kept rolling, because nobody in the booth had any idea what to do, and the number 1 rule in that booth is when you don't know, you roll. For about 20 seconds, nothing happened at all. Then the floor director came out and crouched down beside Ray's seat, and you could see Ray shake his head. The floor director went back. A producer came out. Ray shook his head again. And then Ray Calloway leaned forward, put his elbows on his knees, and spoke to the room from a folding seat in the 4th row, without a microphone, and the boom operator had to swing all the way around to catch it. "I'm not hosting this," he said. "Not this. Y'all can find somebody else for the next 20 minutes, or you can send everybody home. But I'm not standing up there running a game while that sits in the air." Somebody in the back started to clap, and about 400 people shushed them at once. Ray kept going. "In 1998, I did a taping," he said. "Second year I had this job." Man on one side made a joke about the other fellow's wife, who had passed that January, and I let it go. I had a show to do and a producer in my ear, and I told myself it wasn't my business. That man drove home from my studio having been made fun of over his wife on television, and I helped it happen by keeping the thing moving. He was quiet a second. 27 years, he said. I have thought about that man 27 years. So the next season, I wrote a rule, and I made them print it, and it's on the back of every badge that comes through that door, including the one you're wearing right now. He looked at Colton Rask. "Turn it over," Ray said. "Read it out loud." Colton Rask stood at that podium with 400 people looking at him and did not move. And this is where it went somewhere nobody could have planned. Wes Rask, his father, 61 years old, stepped out from behind his podium. He walked past his son without looking at him, crossed the stage, and stood next to Del Marchetti. Then Marisa followed him. Then Ty. Then Dale. In about 15 seconds, every member of the Rask family had left their side of the stage and gone to stand beside a woman they had met 4 hours earlier, and Colton Rask was standing alone at a row of empty podiums. Wes Rask leaned toward Dell's microphone. His voice came out rough. "Ma'am, I raised him," he said, "so this is mine too." And Del Marchetti, 4'11", 69 years old, hands shaking, reached up and patted that big man on the arm and said, "You raised him. You didn't say it. Then she stepped up to her microphone. "Young man," she said, and Colton looked up. "I'm not going to yell at you. My mother would say you can't teach anybody anything while you're yelling at them." She turned the watch on her wrist so the face was up. "You said he's gone. That's true. He's been gone 10 years next month. He went into a house on Ohio Avenue that was already coming down, and he brought out a boy named Devin, who is 19 now and studying to be an engineer. And then my son sat down on the curb, and that was all." She said it very calmly. That was what got people. "This watch doesn't run," Dell said. "It stopped at 12 minutes after 4. 3 men have offered to fix it for me. I told all 3 of them no." She looked at Colton. "Because I know exactly what you'd say about that. You'd say I'm keeping it broken on purpose. And you'd be right. That's what a person does. When you lose somebody, you keep one thing exactly the way they left it. Because the whole rest of the world moves and you need one thing that doesn't." She took a breath. "I sew for the dead," she said. "You wouldn't know that. Nobody knows that. 2 funeral homes in my neighborhood, 45 years. They bring me the suit when a man's gotten too small for it, and I fix it that night, and I don't charge. Because a family that's just lost somebody should not have to stand at my counter and count out money. 1,100 families, more than that now." Her voice caught for the first time, and one of them was mine. "I hemmed my own son's sleeves. On my own table. At 2 o'clock in the morning. The studio was so quiet you could hear the lights buzzing. So don't tell me I'm dragging him out here," Dell said. "I carry him. There's a difference, and someday, God willing, you'll be old enough to know it." Colton Rask reached up with both hands and turned his badge over. He tried twice before it came out. "Nobody's dead," he read, "gets used against them. House rule. R. C." Ray Calloway stood up in the 4th row. He didn't say anything as he came back down the aisle and up the stairs. He picked his microphone up off Dell's podium and clipped it back on. He picked up his cards. He looked at Colton for a long moment, and then he said, quietly, "That's all I wanted, son. That's all I ever want." He turned to the room. "All right," he said. "We're going to go ahead and play a game show now." They played it. Every one of the Rask family walked back to their podiums, and it was, by every account, the strangest and most decent 20 minutes of television anybody in that building had ever been part of. And here's the part people always get wrong when they retell it. Del Marchetti's family lost. They lost by 9 points in the final round. Vince guessed high on a number question and it went the other way, and the buzzer sounded, and the Rask family of Reno, Nevada won $20,000. Nobody cheered, not even Wes. The producers brought out the oversized check the way they always do, and Colton Rask took one look at it and asked, on camera, whether it could be signed over. A producer told him honestly that it didn't work that way. Taxes, contracts, standards, and practices, a whole list of reasons. So Colton said, "Fine, then I'll do it myself, and you can film me doing it, and if you don't film me doing it, I'll film it." He took the card the show gives you for your winnings paperwork, and he wrote on the back of it. And he walked across the stage and handed it to Rosa, of all people, because he could not make himself look at Dell. It had a dollar figure on it and the word all underlined twice. Then he went back to his side, and he stood there, and he did not stop shaking for about 10 minutes. The episode aired 7 weeks later, and the network ran the walk-off uncut, all 11 minutes of it. Ray had told them in a meeting that people still talk about, you cut that, and the rule's just a thing printed on a badge. 52 million views inside 2 weeks. What happened in Youngstown happened fast. The morning after the broadcast, there were 40 people standing outside Marchetti Alterations before Dell got there to unlock it, and by noon there were 200. And by that weekend, the line went past where the bakery used to be. People came with hymns that didn't need doing. They came with buttons. A man drove from Erie, Pennsylvania, with a pair of pants and admitted at the counter that they fit fine. The development company that owned the block put out a statement on a Tuesday. By Thursday, they had renegotiated her lease, backdated the arrears, and locked the rate for 10 years, which anybody in commercial real estate will tell you is not a thing that happens. Rosa and Kim kept their jobs. Dell hired 2 more. The two funeral homes got their own kind of attention, which neither of them wanted and both of them handled well. Bernie Enrico, who is 76 and had been walking suits down that sidewalk since 1984, gave exactly one interview to the Youngstown paper, and it was 4 sentences long. He said Dell had never once asked him who the family was or what they could afford. He said she had never once sent the work back late, not in 41 years, not even the week of her own son's funeral. He said he had personally carried more than 600 garments into that shop, and then he said he wasn't going to talk about it anymore because it was between her and the families, and he hung up the phone. Donations started arriving at both funeral homes from strangers, earmarked for families who couldn't cover a service. Bernie set up an account for it. Last time anybody checked, it had covered 91 funerals. The house rule got a life of its own. People printed it and taped it in break rooms and put it on the wall of a fire station in Missouri. 3 different companies asked to license it for merchandise, and Ray Calloway told all 3 of them no and said if they wanted it that bad, they could just print it themselves and not pay him, which several of them did. Colton Rask took his podcast down for a year. When he brought it back, it was about something else entirely. He does not do game shows anymore. What he does do since that April is drive to Reno's 2 funeral homes on the first Saturday of every month and pick up whatever needs altering and take it to a tailor named Mrs. Ferreira, who does the work, and Colton pays her invoice out of his own pocket. He has done it for years now. He calls it the only useful idea he ever had, and he freely admits he stole it. He and Dell write to each other. Actual letters, because Dell does not do email. She has kept every one of his in a shoebox under the cutting table. A year later, the show brought the Marchetti family back. Devin Ellis came with them, 19 years old, 6'2", a junior in mechanical engineering at Youngstown State. The boy Anthony carried down a burning staircase. He had never met Dell before that week. He had been too young to remember much, and his family had moved to Akron after the fire, and he'd found out who she was the same way the rest of the country did. Watching television in a dorm room. When Ray brought him out, Dell stood up out of her chair and could not get a word out for a full 30 seconds, and Ray Calloway, who has hosted more than 4,000 episodes, just stood there and let the clock run and did not feel the silence, because he'd learned that the hard way in 1998. Devin has dinner at her house now, most Sundays when he's not on campus. He calls her Aunt Dell. The show added the house rule to the opening credits that season. It scrolls by in about 2 seconds, and most people don't catch it, and that is exactly how Ray wanted it. Dell Marchetti is 71 now. She's still in the shop 6 days a week, still 4'11". Still doing the uniforms and the prom dresses and the 2 funeral homes, still refusing to take $1 for any of it. Rosa runs the front. There's a photograph by the register of a young man in a fire coat, and next to it, a card in a cheap plastic frame with 11 words on it. And she still wears the watch. It still doesn't run. A watchmaker in Cleveland offered again after the episode aired, offered to do it free, offered to fly out, offered anything. Dell wrote him a very polite letter back. She thanked him for his kindness, and she said that 412 was where her son left it, and that was where it was going to stay. If this story reached you, do 2 things. Hit that like button and subscribe to this channel so these stories keep getting made. And then think about whether there's somebody in your life carrying something quietly, a watch, a photograph, a name they don't say out loud anymore, and let them carry it without asking them to put it away. Because Ray Calloway got it right from a folding seat in the 4th row. Some things you just don't say about a person's dead, and some things are worth walking off a stage to protect.